Welcome back to my calling card series where I help you align your calling with your online and in-person presence. As someone who has leveraged personal branding to find my dream job right out of law school, this is something I really enjoy talking about. I do strategizing sessions with coworkers and friends. I'm often someone that they go to when they have questions about LinkedIn or any sort of personal branding. And so I just wanted to kind of have all of my advice in one place so that way it can help other people if they need it. My name is Kimber Marie, and I am an IP attorney by day and I guess content creator by night. And so welcome to my calling card series. So in my first episode / post, I discussed the 3 questions that you should ask yourself before beginning your personal branding journey, if you will. The way that I view personal branding though is I see it as something much more organic. I think a lot of people overthink personal branding. I fully recognize that that is ironic, seeing as how I'm saying there are certain questions you should reflect on before beginning. But the reason that I suggest that is because I think a lot of people, when they think of personal branding or starting to be more active, especially online in the digital space, they're thinking of influencers. But there's a big difference between an influencer who is their whole career is leveraging their influence to sell products versus a content creator. A content creator is not necessarily measured by the amount of followers that they have or how many impressions that they may get. Those are important metrics to look at to see what works with your content and what doesn't. And I'll get to that later. But you can be a content creator with a small audience. I have a very small audience and I consider myself a content creator because I create content. And the reason that reflecting on what it is you are wanting to do and talk about is because my method to personal branding is value-based. I think that the way you show up online should be directly related and identical to how you show up in person. And some of you might be thinking, okay, well, I'm shy in person, and I get that. If you were to meet me in person, I would probably be quiet when you first meet me because I have social anxiety. But once I get talking, I am the same as how I show up here. And so I highly recommend going and checking out my first video, my first post, to do a few reflection exercises about what your values are, what your goals are, and where you're trying to go with your personal branding. I think it's something, again, that it's a long-term commitment. It doesn't have to be figured out all at once overnight. Your personal brand should evolve with you. And so don't overstress it. Go and do the exercises. You can do them in like 10 minutes or less and then take action. Like that is the most important thing you can do. And that is something that we're going to discuss today in episode 2, where I'm talking about leveraging the tools that you already have now to get started. So the way that I view part 2 of this series, step 2, if you will, of creating your calling card is in 3 steps. There's Recon, there's implementation, and then there's auditing. The implementation part of this is 50%. It's essentially taking action. But the Recon, which is researching, figuring out the tools that you're going to be leveraging to begin your personal branding and putting yourself out there, that is very important because, one, I think it takes pressure off when you know exactly what you're going to do to begin. It's kind of like going grocery shopping. If you go in with a list, you're usually much more intentional, efficient, and targeted with your grocery shopping trip. Whereas if sometimes, like what I do, if you go in without a list, you end up spending a lot more time, a lot more money, and you end up with things that maybe you didn't intend to buy. And so I highly recommend being intentional and figuring out, and again, that's why that reflection exercise is really important, figuring out exactly what tools you're going to start with when it comes to personal branding. And then the third step, which I'll go into more detail here shortly, is the auditing. This is where you're going to reflect periodically on what you've done so far, what's gone well, what hasn't gone as well, maybe certain goals that you didn't hit, and figuring out potentially why that is. And again, I want to say this is a long-term commitment. Your personal brand, it should be organic. It should evolve with you. There is really no right or wrong or starting and end point, at least with the way that I view personal branding. If you are someone where you are trying to get a very specific job, and maybe you have no intentions of continuing to show up online or personal brand yourself after you get said job, that is your prerogative. I personally think for a lot of reasons that you should very much consider continuing the personal branding process even after you get that job. And maybe I'll make another video getting into that later. But for now, let's talk about how to leverage the tools that you already have to begin your personal branding journey. So with step one, that's Recon. I want you to look at what are you already doing in your life that has brought opportunities for you. When I was in law school and I started really leveraging personal branding and posting online, I was on LinkedIn already looking at other people's profiles, engaging with content, just scrolling because I was a law student. I needed internships. I wanted to graduate with a job lined up, which that didn't happen, but that has been addressed in other videos. And so I was already on the platform. I was already scrolling on Instagram and TikTok. And so basically I turned that into a tool. So instead of just doom scrolling, instead of just consuming, why not create? And this is basically how I want you to view where you're at now. Maybe you're someone where you don't show up as much online, but you go to a lot of in-person networking events. That is a tool, and that is something that you should very much consider when viewing your personal brand. Maybe you're not called to start a YouTube channel or a podcast. That's okay. Those are great tools though, and for those of you who are more introverted, maybe that's where you begin because you can do that in the privacy of your own home. And so with your reconnaissance, your recon of the tools that you want to leverage and how you want to get started, think of the in-person and online tools that you have at your disposal that you know that you will show up to. And this is the most important part of this step. Make the barrier to entry as low as possible. That's why I want you to go ahead and start where you're at. So as you're examining the tools you have at your disposal, I also want you to consider, are you leveraging those tools effectively? So for example, going back to LinkedIn, and you may not be using LinkedIn and maybe you are. For me, this is the best example I can give because this is how I started this journey. When I started posting on LinkedIn, I also started paying attention to, am I getting the most out of this platform? Am I using it effectively? Social media platforms, the reason that they put commenting functions, posting functions, live streaming functions on there is because they want you to use them. So if you are just lurking on LinkedIn and all you're doing is scrolling and maybe liking a post here and there, you are not leveraging it to the best of your ability. And the same is going to go for a networking event in person or a conference. Let's say you sign up for a conference, it's in the industry that you're trying to break into, you show up and you hang out by the water fountain. You're not leveraging that event to the best of its ability, right? That's essentially what happens when you go on a social media platform and all you do is just scroll. So look into these tools that you're wanting to leverage more and figure out ways you want to determine, how can I get the most out of this? How can I engage with people? In an online platform, it's more than likely for most platforms, it's going to be commenting, engaging, messaging, and actually reaching out to people, not just scrolling and liking. In person, it's going to be the same situation, but you can be creative with how you approach this depending on the context of the in-person event. For example, you wouldn't in the middle of a talk at a lecture series start networking with people, right? That would be inorganic and awkward and rude to the people speaking. But if they have a networking mixer after the lecture series, you want to make sure that you're staying long enough to leverage that and go and talk to people. And I can make another video that just focuses on in-person networking. That's something that I'm trying to prioritize more this year. So we'll do more details on that later. But for now, when you're thinking of what tools can I leverage that I'm already doing, make a list of those things that, again, you're already doing and do some research and see, how can I get the most out of this? Next, step 2, implement. And this is literally take action. You don't want to spend so much time planning, and I do this all the time. Don't spend so much time planning that you're just sitting there. Like you've done all this research, you've done all this reconnaissance, do something with it, because otherwise there was no point in doing all of that if you're not actually going to implement it. And so let's say you want to start posting on LinkedIn and you recognize that commenting on other people's posts with substantive questions and engagement and conversation is really a great way, probably the best way, in my opinion, to leverage LinkedIn. That and actually messaging people. And not even just messaging people a quick, hey, how are you? But actually studying their profiles, leveraging the voice notes function, maybe even sending a video, depending on the context. You actually want, where was I going with that thought? Once you have an idea of the things that you can try with these tools that you've decided is going to be your game plan, you want to implement it. Schedule it into your calendar. Block off time to sit down and take action. And then at the end of every week, every month, and every quarter, you want to go over those tools that you said you were going to use. This is step 3, and very important. You want to see, did you actually use them? This is not about perfection. This is about getting better 1% every day. That's it. And this is something that I easily allow myself to get burnt out on. I say I'm going to post every day on like 4 different platforms. I may do it for a week, 2 weeks, hell, maybe even a month, but then I get burnt out, and like now for the past 2 weeks, I've had a really big creative block because I was burned out. I stretched myself too thin. I need to dial it back and figure out a schedule for leveraging these tools that I am excited to use, but I need to use them in a way that's sustainable. And the same goes for you, whether it's in person or online. Going to a networking event every single night, Monday through Friday, is probably going to burn you out. But maybe going to one once a week if they're available, or once every other week, once a month. Those are completely doable goals. And so when you are auditing yourself in your action and your efforts, you want to make sure, did I actually use them? Did I leverage them in a way that made sense with the research I did in my recon step? And what came from that? Let's say that you're looking back on your analytics, or you're looking back on your efforts, and you were able to get 5 business cards at an in-person networking event at one event, and you got 0 at another. Why do you think that is? Let's say you started posting regularly on YouTube and LinkedIn, and you're getting a lot of engagement on LinkedIn, but not on YouTube. Why do you think that is? Make observations, plan for the next week, month, or quarter, whatever period you're at in this process, and figure out ways that you can try something new while also building on those things that worked for you. And it could be that those things that didn't work, maybe it's trying them again. Keep in mind that personal branding journey, again, it's usually a long-term game. When I started this, my second year of law school, that was in 2022, 2023-ish. And so it's been a year plus of me posting, personal branding myself, putting myself out there, networking to get the job. If you have a goal to get a certain position, or have a certain level of income, or know a certain person, whatever your goal is, whatever it is you're trying to reach, just know that it could take time. Yes, there are some people who are able to make this happen overnight, but you don't know what the ins and outs of their day are, what their network already looks like. Some people are just blessed and born with a network that other people don't have. They have access to resources that maybe you don't. And so make sure that you are taking into consideration where you're at, the resources you do have and maybe you don't have, and have grace with yourself. And this is why auditing is so important. You don't want to be harsh on yourself when you're not meeting your goals. At the same time, you also want to balance that with a little bit of tough love. If you haven't posted in 2 weeks, which that's me now, you need to light a fire under your ass and just get back into it. You just have to do it some days. And so that is why I'm going to sign off this video with this one big tip for when you start leveraging your tools, figuring out what you're going to be using as your platform for your personal brand. Make sure that you are considering what will you do on your worst day. I know a lot of people, especially on social media, are encouraging people to think, what would your ideal morning routine be, or your ideal evening routine? What is the dream version of you doing day to day? And those are great exercises, but we have to keep in mind that life is not easy, breezy, and perfect. There's going to be a lot of stressful days, a lot of low energy days, a lot of days where you feel great, but you just don't want to do anything. You just kind of want to rot and do nothing. What is the bare minimum that you can do on those days where you're sick, you're tired, you're burned out, you're sad, whatever it may be? What is the bare minimum that you can do on those days that won't set back your progress for the goals that you're reaching? So with all of that, that is my advice for figuring out how to leverage tools that you already have and getting the most out of them so that way you can create the platform upon which your personal brand exists. If you like this content, subscribe. You can follow me at Kimber Marie James on all platforms and give me a connection request on LinkedIn. I, as you can tell, love LinkedIn and I'm on it every day. And if you have any questions or topics you'd like me to cover, put them in the comments and I'll see you next time.